Hello everyone, hope you guys are doing great. We've talked about geometric basis for organizing the forms and spaces of a building in chapter 4 2 weeks ago. So this week's topic discusses additional principles that can be utilized to create order in an architectural composition. Order refers not simply to geometric regularity, but rather to a condition in which part of a whole is properly disposed with reference to other parts and to its purpose so as to produce a harmonious arrangement. Order without diversity can result in a monotony or boredom. Diversity without order can produce chaos. A sense of unity with variety is the ideal. The following ordering principles are seen as visual devices that allow the varied and diverse forms and spaces of a building to coexist perceptually and conceptually within an ordered, unified, and harmonious whole. Over the course of history, architectural historians and architects have discovered ordering principles that are inherent in design and can be used to break down the components of a building to study relationship between these parts. Occasionally, architects think about their designs in terms of these principles, but they are primarily used as tools to understand what the design achieves. A few of the most useful ordering principles are defined below: axis, symmetry, hierarchy, datum, rhythm, transformation. Ordering principles are visual methods that allow the form and space of a building to coexist in order to make a design complete. Axis. What is axis? A line established by 2 points in space about which forms and spaces can be arranged in a symmetrical or balanced manner. An axis is a central line that helps to organize the design. Often there is an axis at the center of a building or over a doorway. When architects use an axis or a focal point in their design, it acts like a straight arrow on a sign pointing you in the right direction. Simply stated, axis is an imaginary line that is used to organize a group of elements in a design. It is a line established by 2 points in space, which forms and spaces can be arranged in a regular or irregular manner. It implies symmetry and it demands balance. It can be powerful, dominating, and a regulating device. Since an axis is essentially a linear condition, it has qualities of length and direction and induces movement and promotes views along its path. For its definition, an axis must be terminated at both of its ends by a significant form or space. The notion of an axis can be reinforced by defining edges along its length. These edges can be simply lines on the ground plane or vertical planes that define a linear space coincident with the axis. An axis can also be established simply by a symmetrical arrangement of forms and spaces. The terminating elements of an axis serve to both send and receive its visual thrust. These culminating elements can be any of the following: points in space established by vertical linear elements or centralized building forms, vertical planes such as symmetrical building facades or fronts preceded by a forecourt or similar open space, well-defined spaces generally centralized or regular in form, gateways that open outward toward a view or vista beyond. Axis is mainly used to align elements. When elements are arranged around an axis, the design feels ordered, as seen here at the Salk Institute designed by Louis Kahn. As you can see here, it's like pointing towards one direction. Next, we'll see the video and overview how the axis actually works. so the design feels ordered. This is the C1 Chinese courtyard house. If you were to imagine as an imaginary axis line, that is how axis works in general. So everything else is aligned around the axis. So there's a sense of balance and order. Next, we will view symmetry. Symmetry. While an axial condition can exist without a symmetrical condition being simultaneously present, a symmetrical condition cannot exist without implying the existence of an axis or center about which is structured. An axis is established by 2 points. A symmetrical condition requires the balanced arrangement of equivalent patterns of form and space on opposite sides of a dividing line or plane, or about a center of axis. There are two fundamental types of symmetry. Bilateral symmetry refers to the balanced arrangement of similar or equivalent elements on opposite sides of the median axis so that only one plane can divide the whole into essentially identical halves. Radial symmetry refers to the balanced arrangement of similar radiating elements such that the composition can be divided into similar halves by passing a plane at any angle around a center point or along a central axis. As you can see here, this is the example of a radial symmetry of the great stupa at Sachi. And this is the bilateral symmetry example. It's the ritual complex of Feng Shui. In this particular image, it's multiple symmetries, both major and minor, can add complexity and hierarchy to a composition, as well as accommodate programmatic and contextual requirements. This also can be seen in Exeter Library designed by Louis Kahn. It is very obvious in this floor plan. It can be divided evenly. We'll take a look at the video.
Pour habiller le hall d'accueil,
It's all about balance, and the symmetry is very direct and clear in this floor plan. Next, we'll take a look at hierarchy. The principle of hierarchy implies that in most, if not all, architectural compositions, real differences exist among their forms and spaces. These differences reflect the degree of importance of these forms and spaces, as well as the functional, formal, and symbolic roles they play in the organization. The value system by which relative importance it is measured will of course depend on the specific situation, the needs and desires of the users, and the decisions of the designer. The values expressed may be individual or collective, personal or cultural. In any case, the manner in which the functional or symbolic differences among a building's elements are revealed is critical to the establishment of a visible hierarchical order among its forms and spaces. For a form or space to be articulated as being important and significant to an organization, it must be made uniquely visible. This visual emphasis can be achieved by endowing a form or shape with exceptional size, a unique shape, a strategic location. In an architectural composition, there can be more than a single dominant element. Secondary points of emphasis that have less attention value than the primary focal point create visual accents. This distinctive but subordinate elements can both accommodate variety and create visual interest, rhythm, and tension in a composition. If carried too far, however, this interest may be replaced by confusion. So be very careful. When everything is emphasized, then nothing is emphasized at all. Hierarchy is when an element appears more important in comparison to other elements in design. An element will appear more hierarchical if it is more dominant than other elements in a design. We naturally look first at the largest element in the design. A form or space can be made visually dominant and thus important by clearly differentiating its shape from the other elements in the composition. A form or space may be strategically placed to call attention to itself as being the most important element in a composition. Hierarchically, important locations for a form or space include the termination of a linear sequence or axial organization, the centerpiece of asymmetrical organization, the focus of a centralized or radial organization, being set above, below, or in the foreground of a composition. Here's an example of hierarchy in a plan for Savannah, Georgia. As you can see, different sizes. Another good example, this is the view of Florence. It illustrates the dominance of the cathedral over the urban landscape. As you can see, the dome there, it stands really tall and proudly as a form of hierarchy. Let's take a look at the video. So as you can see here, everything is somewhat low rise and the cathedral is the one standing tall, which is with its shape and size. Another great example is this Military History Museum by Daniel Levitskin. What he wanted to do, his intention, was to create a bold interruption. In this case, is hierarchy, a fundamental dislocation to penetrate the historic arsenal and create a new experience. So it's a completely different design from its original existing building. So this is a form of hierarchy. Let's take a look at the video. You can see how the opposite form, it's a complete opposite form compared to the classical shapes that is of the original existing building. All right, so we're done with hierarchy. Now we'll go to datum. A datum refers to a line, plane, or volume of reference to which other elements in a composition can relate. It organizes a random pattern of elements through its regularity, continuity, and constant presence. For example, the lines of a musical staff serve as a datum in providing the visual basis for reading notes and the relative pitches of their tones. The regularity of their spacing and their continuity organizes, clarifies, and accentuates the differences between the series of notes in a musical compositions. Datum, a line, a plane, a volume that is by its continuity, regularity serves together, measure, and organize a pattern of forms and spaces. Given a random organization of dissimilar elements, A datum can organize the elements in the following ways. A line can cut through or form a common edge for the pattern, while a grid of lines can form a neutral, unifying field for the pattern. A plane can gather the pattern of elements beneath it or serve as an encompassing background for the elements and frame them in its field. A volume can collect the pattern of elements within its boundaries or organize them along its perimeter. Here you can view an arcade. How the arcade is an open space and it acts as a datum where other forms are gathering around the arcade and open space. Here, an axis works as a datum. And the inner ring is a dramatic atrium with enormous circular openings in its walls that reveal several floors of book stacks in the Exeter Library by Lewis Kahn. It anchors all 4 openings and floors. Another perfect example is the Piazza San Marco that acts as a binding anchoring element where spaces gather around. Let's take a look at the video. Next, we'll go to rhythm. What is rhythm? Rhythm refers to any movement characterized by a pattern recurrence of elements or motifs at a regular or irregular intervals. The movement may be of our eyes as we follow recurring elements in a composition, or of our bodies as we advance through a sequence of spaces. In either case, rhythm incorporates the fundamental notion of repetition as a device to organize forms and spaces in architecture. Almost all building types incorporate elements that are by their nature repetitive. Beams and columns repeat themselves to form repetitive structural base and modules of space. Windows and doors repeatedly puncture the surfaces of a building to allow light, air, views, and people to enter the interior. Spaces often recur to accommodate similar or repetitive functional requirements in the building programs. We tend to group elements in a random composition according to their closeness or proximity to one another, the visual characteristics they share in common. The principle of repetition utilizes both of these concepts of visual perception to order recurring elements in a composition. The simplest form of repetition is a linear pattern of redundant elements. Elements need not be perfectly identical. However, it is to be grouped in a repetitive fashion. They may merely share a common trait or a denominator, allowing each element to be individually unique, yet belong to the same family. So it can be in size, it can be in different shapes, it can also be in detailed characteristics. Structural patterns often incorporate the repetition of vertical supports at regular or harmonious intervals, which define modular bays or divisions of space. Within such repetitive patterns, the importance of a space can be emphasized by its size and placement. You can see here a project by Le Corbusier, Unit de Habitation. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced differently. It's repetition of units to fulfill the functional requirement. So we'll take a look at the facade It's a video. In the Yoyogi National Gymnasium building, in this building, detail that provides visual likeness to the structure is the graceful cantilevers containing the stands that give the impression that the building will levitate. So this stands also to accommodate the rhythmically arranged openings. So you can see the roof has this sense of rhythm, a sense of movement. Let's take a look at the video. Rhythmic patterns provide continuity and lead us to anticipate what comes next. So you can see here, contrasting rhythms and horizontal and vertical rhythms. These are the Victorian facades in San Francisco. Multiple rhythms can be laid over one another in the facade of a building.
Nearly 514 blocks of San Francisco, including much of Nob Hill,
This is a form of repetition,
were destroyed by the 1906.
laid over one another. The radial segments of a Nautilus shell spiral outward in a reverberating manner from its center and maintain the shell's organic unity through this pattern of additive growth. Using the mathematical ratio of the golden section, a series of rectangles can be generated to form a unified organization wherein each rectangle is proportionate to the others as well as the overall structure. Progressive reverberating patterns of forms and spaces can be organized in the following ways: in a radial or concentric manner about a point, sequentially according to size in a linear fashion, randomly but related by proximity as well as similarity of form. This is a repetition, a form of repetition, and rhythm, central circular structures. Another form of movement, another principle of movement and rhythm in the art gallery in Iran by Alba Alto. Finally, we'll go to transformation. The principle of transformation allows a designer to select a prototypical architectural model whose formal structure and ordering of elements might be appropriate and reasonable, and to transform it through a series of discrete manipulations in order to respond to the specific conditions and context of the design task at hand. Design is a generative process of analysis and synthesis, of trial and error, of trying out its potential, it is essential that a designer understand the fundamental nature and structure of the concept. In architecture, transformation is defined as the principle that an architectural concept, structure, or organization can be altered through a series of discrete manipulations and permutations in response to a specific context or set of conditions without a loss of identity or concept. Refer to the design of Alva Alto, which you observe the shape of the library area and the utilization of the space for the reading room. So this is a form of transformation. You see the shapes that have changed and how he utilizes the space for the reading room. And this is the transformation of a cruciform plan organization by Frank Lloyd Wright. It is the Willits House in Highland Park, Illinois. So we'll take a look at the video. This will be the last video for today. It's built in 1902. The Willits House is the first clear, comprehensive embodiment of the cruciform prairie residence. The two major intersecting spatial volumes are clearly expressed in the exterior massing of the building. The continuity and extension of spaces are emphasized by the horizontal lines of the large overhanging roofs and the low parapet walls. And that sums up today's topic about ordering principles. I hope you understand what have been presented today. And if you don't, do not hesitate to ask us. Thank you very much.